Welcome to Podkey Fantasy Football, where today's draft values get pressure tested from every angle. A lot of fantasy arguments sound confident right up until you ask what's actually repeatable. Touchdowns, camp buzz, contract headlines, MVP chatter, market scores, all of it gets noisy fast when the incentives and missing context start showing up. Tight end might be the cleanest place to see the market overreact to touchdowns. The historical note here is pretty sharp. High touchdown tight ends, around 0.6 scores per game or better, usually fail to beat the next year's ADP by much, and none topped expectations by more than 4 PBR points. That doesn't mean every breakout is fake. It means touchdown-driven breakouts are usually the least stable part of the profile. The middle bucket, around 0.4 to 0.6 touchdowns per game, is where people get trapped. There's ceiling there, but the floor is ugly because the player looks elite in the box score without always being elite in weekly usage. That's why Trey McBride is such a useful case. The real signal wasn't just output, it was route volume. If the routes and target share live at the threshold that supports roughly 17 points per game, early round value can work. If that target share slips, the draft cost falls apart quickly. And this is where market score tools help and mislead at the same time. Brock Bowers getting a perfect score can be true inside the model, but the model may not price the opportunity cost of passing on stronger wide receiver or running back options in that same range. Positional scarcity matters, but so does what you're giving up to buy it. The draft ladder the analysts used is useful because it makes the trade-off concrete. About 17 points per game can justify round 1 or 2 capital, 16 points more toward the middle of round 2, and 15 can slide into the 2-3 turn. Those are small scoring differences with very large pricing consequences. At running back, the arguments are less about talent than about what kind of risk you're willing to underwrite. Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs sitting in Tier 1 makes sense because the ceiling and role insulation are easier to explain. The harder question is someone like Ashton Genty. If you put him in Tier 1 already, you're paying for the possibility of elite production before it's been sustained. Keeping him in Tier 2 is less exciting, but it's more honest about what still has to be proven. Jonathan Taylor is the same debate in veteran form. The pro Tier 1 case is obvious. He's done it before. The Tier 2 case is also obvious. Injuries, age curve, and the cost of missing on a first-round startup back in Superflex. Derrick Henry is a great reminder that touchdowns aren't just player skill, they're environment and role. 24 one-yard carries versus Saquon Barkley's 3 tells you why fantasy gaps can get exaggerated. If the goal line role holds, Henry can still beat Price. If age trims volume or the offense changes shape, that edge disappears fast. That same logic explains the so-called dead zone. Kyren Williams, Travis Etienne, Breece Hall, these are players whose ADP gets pinned by uncertainty about receiving work, role definitions, or offensive competition. The market isn't saying they're bad, it's saying the path to a true league-winning outcome is harder to sketch cleanly. And format changes the answer. In redraft, you can take more of that risk because waivers and one-year horizons soften mistakes. In Dynasty, the same backs can turn into aging liabilities before your roster is ready to cash in. Wide receiver analysis gets better the second you stop treating targets as the whole story. Separation score and route win rate can tell you whether a player is creating offense, even when the surface stats lag. That's why someone like DJ Moore can still grade well despite a modest fantasy headline. But good process doesn't erase context. Emeka Egbuka's early surge got hit by a hamstring and poor quarterback play. Jameson Williams gained value when volume conditions changed around him. George Pickens nearly doubled his points per game when CeeDee Lamb was out. Those are useful reminders that wide receiver production is partly talent and partly traffic flow. Availability risk belongs in the model too. Rashid Rice's profile looks strong in high-value usage, especially near the end zone, but multiple suspensions, a 30-day jail sentence, and 22 missed games are not background noise. They are valuation inputs. The same goes for veterans. Mike Evans still posts elite numbers, including a 24.4% target share, but if recurring hamstring and collarbone issues keep threatening missed time, then season-long reliability is lower than the raw efficiency suggests. Market tools can find upside here, but they can also overstate it. Ladd McConkey getting flagged as undervalued might tell you the market is sleeping a bit, but if first downs per route stay under 7% and target efficiency is slipping, then the red flag is doing real work. A comp is not a pardon. Similarity scores and market comps are most useful when they generate questions, not when they end the discussion. Zay Flowers comping to a DeAndre Hopkins season, or Ashton Genty comping to Christian McCaffrey highlights upside tails. Josh Downs looking cheap because of a larger projected role can also be valid. But then you still have to ask whether the team context, quarterback stability, and adjacent ADP make that upside realistically purchasable. Platform ADP variance matters for the same reason. Caleb Williams at QB6 on Underdog and QB9 on Sleeper isn't just trivia. It tells you different player pools are pricing risk differently. Sharper best ball drafters may be willing to pay for ceiling earlier than more casual mock draft rooms. Some of that spread should tighten as the season gets closer, but until it does, value is platform-specific, and one-size-fits-all Superflex rankings should be treated as maps, not law, because every league creates its own quarterback market. The exposure point matters too. Keeping early round exposure under about 25% in redraft is a risk management rule, not a take. In Dynasty, concentration can be more acceptable if the asset profile survives short-term injury or value dips. The Mahomes extension story is a good example of how giant numbers can sound more radical than they really are. The headline number, 8 years and $504.5 million, is enormous. The underlying point is that deferrals and structure can create immediate cap relief, with commentators noting something like $36 million of near-term space. That sounds like magic until you remember the bill still exists. It's just being moved into a revenue environment. Teams expect to be larger later. That's why the better-supported argument is that quarterback contracts have ballooned in nominal dollars without becoming historically unprecedented as a share of the cap. If the cap share stays in that rough 10 to 17% band, the shock is mostly aesthetic. MVP works similarly. Since 2013, it's basically a quarterback award, which means non-quarterback cases need absurd seasons plus narrative momentum. A running back probably needs a 2,000-yard rushing season and real receiving volume just to get invited into the conversation. So when dark horse quarterbacks get floated, Trevor Lawrence, Dak Prescott, Brock Purdy, Bo Nix, Baker Mayfield, CJ Stroud, the right question isn't whether each has a path. Most of them do. The question is whether that path includes team success, visibility, and a story voters want to tell. MVP is partly performance and partly broadcast packaging. Training camp role battles matter because they can move price before they move projections. Seattle is a clean example. If Zach Charbonnet is recovering from ACL issues and the field includes Jadrian Price, George Halani and Emmanuel Wilson, then every strong practice report becomes a temporary market mover. That doesn't mean clarity has arrived. It means uncertainty is being traded in real time. The Chargers and Jaguars have similar dynamics, with health and pecking order shaping whether late-round darts become playable. A healthy return or a role confirmation can shove a player multiple rounds almost overnight. Off-field stories have to be handled carefully, but they do matter when they affect availability, contract leverage, or roster opportunity. Brandon Ayuk's public rehab and contract drama, reportedly giving the 49ers leverage on guarantees, is not the same type of issue as severe criminal charges like Terry Arnold's, but both become football relevant once they change team behavior or career timelines. The same principle applies to Geno Smith's allegations, Brandon Sorsby's delayed draft path, and Rashid Rice's conduct history. Fantasy managers sometimes treat these as PR sideshows. Teams usually do not. The theme across all of this is pretty simple. Don't confuse a loud signal with a stable one. If the price is being set by touchdowns, camp hype, or a clean comp without enough context, slow down and ask what actually carries forward. Thanks for listening to Podkey Fantasy Football. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.